Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 227, Grasso versus Shevchenko 2, also known as Noche UFC. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. We were talking just a few minutes before we started recording, and I kind of let out that I thought on paper this was an absolutely miserable card, and I was ready to go jumping in with all my reasons why. All these fighters coming off losses, multiple fighters debuting who lost on the Contender Series and got signed anyway, which kind of defeats the purpose of the Contender Series. And then in the last 5 minutes, while we've been just kind of getting ready to record, I stopped in my tracks and I realized, wait a minute, this is a free fight night. If this were a pay-per-view card, which I forget that it isn't because it has that title fight at the top, this is all-time or bad. But yeah, for a card that's going to be on regular cable, even if it's at a full-size arena instead of the Apex, I mean, I'm still not giving it an A+, but considering that there's a pretty evenly matched title fight at the top featuring one of the most dominant fighters in the sport, yeah, this is A- territory to me. I still think the rest of the card is pretty mediocre, even by Fight Night standards, but Grasso versus Shevchenko 2 for free does wonders.
Yeah, you know what the UFC, I know they're trying to do this special thing on Mexico and all this stuff, but you know what they should have done is take the Grasso Shevchenko fight and take Holland and Madalena and put it on last week's, especially, I mean, Madalena not fighting in Australia makes no sense to begin with.
Yeah.
You know? And then that's a pretty decent pay-per-view. Like, we were complaining about the pay-per-view not being, you know, the most stacked and this and that. But those two fights on there completely changes.
Absolutely. And Holland versus De La Madalena is one of the few fights on this card that doesn't feature a Hispanic fighter. They, to the UFC's credit, they didn't put this card in Mexico, but they did get a bunch of Mexican and Latin American fighters on there, and then a good number of Hispanic American fighters who clearly identify very closely with their Hispanic heritage, and then they dress it up calling it Noche UFC, which on the one hand is cringy as hell, but on the other hand, it's a little more interesting than UFC Vegas 78 or whatever this was going to be. So I'm all over the place on this one. Did you give a letter grade to this one? Yeah,
I mean, you know, the top two fights kind of carry it, but yeah, it's a fight night with a title fight, so I'll go like an A- too.
Okay. South of those top two fights, name me the fight or the individual fighter that you're most excited for. Like, if you're the praying type and you're just praying that please don't let this fight fall off the card, what is it?
That's one I'm definitely worried about too. Is Cortez and Jasudavicius. I think you know, I like fighters that could do things in the division, and Jasudavicius has been a really nice surprise, and obviously Cortez is someone that a lot of people are very high on. So that's probably the fight I'd be leaning towards.
It's actually the one I'd pick as well. So if you were doing a better job in your third job, you know, I know you have, of course, your police work, which is very important. You have the Shillan and Duffy show, which is even more important. And then most important of all, you are the card order organizer for the UFC.
I'm doing terrible.
Having that one third out of the game. And we got Raul Rosas Jr. and Terrence Mitchell both coming off losses third from the top.
I understand that Raul Rosas. I mean, he's such a, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a novelty, you know, based on the story and his age. I understand. Like, he's still going to have hype. And so that one's okay. But I mean, like Kyle Nelson on the main card. I mean, over, you know, the Cortez and Jasudavicius. I think Lupi Godinez versus Elise could be higher. Like the order is really wacky.
It's whacked, and it may change.
I say wacky in Spanish.
I would just say local.
Loco, yeah, hey guys, loco.
It's not local. There's every chance that the lineup might shuffle a little bit between now, Monday night when we're recording, and Saturday, because Another little bit of news about this card is that it was gutted. It lost 3 of its best fights within the last couple months. We were supposed to have Chris Curtis versus Anthony Hernandez on this card. We lost it when Curtis dropped out. We were supposed to have Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Kelvin Gastelum on this card. Gastelum got injured in training, which probably just saved him getting injured in the cage. We had supposed to have Daniel Rodriguez versus Santiago Ponzinibbio on this card, which, even if both those guys are on the downslide, would have been absolute blood and guts. We lost all those, and that's part of the reason I think that stuff like the Padilla and Nelson fight leaked their way up to the, they kind of made their way up or just by not getting canceled. And then the strawweight women's fights on this card were basically musical chairs. We'll talk about each of those fights as we get to them, but basically they just took all the women that were left and kind of drew their names out of a hat. Any other general thoughts about this card before we dig into the prelims?
No, it just the more you say, all these fights, it just keeps making me think that they should have combined these 2 cards together.
I would have loved that, but you know what? Combining cards together does not get the UFC to its quota of 40 ESPN cards a year or whatever they're on the hook for. So we get what we get, and as long as it's free, we at least temper our complaints. At least as the card is set up as of right now, the first fight out of the gate at Noche UFC is a women's strawweight matchup between Josefine Knutsson and Marnic Mann. Knutsson, the 27-year-old Swede, is a perfect 6-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. She will be making her debut here. She fought on August 22nd on the Contender Series, taking a unanimous decision over Isis Verbeek. She'll be facing off against a fellow Contender Series veteran in Mann. The 30-year-old Montana native fought last September on the Contender Series, got memorably knocked out by a head kick from Bruna Brazil, one of the highlights of the 6th season of the Contender Series. She went back to the regionals, picked up a win in LFA in April, and here she gets the short notice call-up replacing Jasmine Lucindo. Odds heavily favor the Swede. She is minus 475, Mann plus 350. I understand, Keith, why that line is what it is. I kind of buried the lead here. If you're unfamiliar, if you didn't see her on the Contender Series, because of course they talked about it then, what you need to know about Josefine Knutsson is she is a world Muay Thai champ. She was the world Muay Thai champ in 2018. She was a medalist in 2019. She's a very decorated kickboxer, one of the top pound-for-pound kickboxers in those lower weight classes over the last 5 years or so. And she's facing someone in Mann who's most famous for getting kicked right in the damn face. The good news about Marnic Mann is... the good news about Marnic Mann is she picked herself up after the Contender Series, and she went and got a win over Amber Brown. Amber Brown is a veteran. She's a good name. But Brown, kind of like possibly Mann herself, is really an atomweight. Marnic Mann is probably one of the 2 or 3 shortest women in the UFC. She's not skinny and rangy like Brown. I mean, she is kind of stocky and powerfully built. She might not be able to make 105 pounds, but she's definitely going to be at a height and reach disadvantage to everybody she fights, certainly including Knutsson, who is a pretty average-sized strawweight. Everyone remembers the knockout on the Contender Series, but she wasn't doing that badly up to that point. I actually was kind of surprised at how well she was holding her own in the striking. I was mostly frustrated that she had tried the stupid headlock scarf hold throw like 3 times and it hadn't worked any of them. If she tries any of that stuff on Knutsson, she's toast. Nice things about Josefine Knutsson for someone who has transitioned to MMA fairly recently. She seems to have had it hammered into her by her coaches. Everyone's going to want to take you down. This is what you do about it. Which makes sense. She's training out of a very good gym in All-Star, or, she's there with Alexander Gustafsson, Hamzat Chimaev, some outstanding fighters and training partners. But, if you watch her fights leading up to the Contender Series and on the Contender Series, most women need to clinch to get a takedown. There just aren't many women that shoot takedowns from the outside. There's just, there's not as robust a high school and college wrestling culture. So she understands that most of her opponents are going to want to take her down. She understands that most of them are going to need to clinch with her in order to do so. And so, like a Muay Thai champ, she tends to own the clinch. She initiates it if she can tell people are coming in. She stays busy punishing them with knees. She has really nice punches kind of over and under the collar tie if people are trying to grab at her. She doesn't make it a comfortable place. If Marnic Mann walks up and tries to clinch and get the scarf hold arm lock throw, I think she's going to get pummeled. Mann isn't as bad as her results on the Contender Series made her look, but this is a bad matchup for her. She's, short, stocky, pretty hard swinging, but really does like to clinch and try to get takedowns from the clinch. I don't think they're going to be there for her. It would be too much to ask for Knutsson to get a highlight reel walk-off knockout like Bruna Brazil did on the Contender Series, but I think she's definitely getting a knockout here. This isn't going to be the kind of fight where she's going to have to sit back and just outpoint her to a 30-27 decision. Mann's going to have to press the issue, and she's going to pay for it. Give me Knutsson by second round knockout here.
Yeah, I mean, this fight's easy to say that it's striker versus grappler, but that's pretty easy to say. You mentioned Knutsson being a Muay Thai striker or world champion. What is more like prestigious, that world championship or the Kentucky Judo Federation title? Honestly, when people mention to me, like, I know that was a big joke. When people mention to me like Muay Thai world champion, I'm like, I'm at the point when you throw out Muay Thai, I just know the word afterwards going to be world champion. Like, it's just, who's not a world champion in Muay Thai that does Muay Thai? Just, I don't know. I don't follow Muay Thai, so maybe she is very, very prestigious. I just, okay. What I've seen of her, she's a good counter striker, high guard defense. She draws out attacks pretty well with her feints. She's got a good check left hook. She hits hard. She does load up a little bit too much for my liking. With the check hook, what I do love that she does is she'll double it up. Like, she'll throw a left hook and then follow again with a left hook, which is a little unusual. Because of that, it lands. Obviously, a lot of kicks, especially from her lead leg. She likes push kicks. She has such great dexterity in her kick. She'll throw like a very fast high kick. We saw that at her last match on the Contender Series. She dropped her opponent immediately with a lead, just flipped it out almost like a question mark kick. She's very physically strong. You mentioned she can grind in the clinch, and I like that you mentioned that she'll be the one to initiate it. She can wrestle better than you'd think a striker. I've seen her get some takedowns. That's because she's very physically strong. You can see, I mean, there's going to be a big difference in the physique of both these women. More in height, but just the way they're built. She's got some mean ground and pound, though. She does need to. I agree that her takedown defense is been solid, but she definitely needs to improve it. And Marnic Mann is someone who's going to go after her and going to try to take her down and try to submit her. And obviously, she's not a submission threat at all. Marnic Mann, you mentioned, she's only 5 feet tall. Besides, being short, she's not a great athlete either. She will try to get in the pocket and unload some shots. She works like a jab to get in there. She throws a lot of left hooks. They're kind of winging. But she's very defensive, very hittable. Not much of a kicking game. She tends to lack head movement. She also pillars, which is the first time listening. That's just very hiding behind your forearms, which I'm not a big fan of. But everything she does in her striking is just to close the distance. She wants to get the clinch herself, where she actually kind of uses her short base to kind of get underneath her opponent, use that leverage there to get the fight to the ground. She's also good at landing knees, using her strength and landing knees inside. A lot of her takedowns come from the body lock. She likes up body throws. She'll do that headlock throw. She'll even pull guard. I've seen her pull guard in a fight to get the fight to the ground. She's definitely she's not a strong wrestler. She's not going to drive through your hips, but she's definitely a BJJ practitioner. Her last fight against Amber Round, she moved well to the mount, got some back takes. She chained submissions together, which I like. She will, if she's on top, lay some ground and pound to set up some submissions. But she can be too aggressive. Like in the fight against Amber Round, she lost position, actually gave up her back at one point. So obviously, this is a classic striker versus grappler. I'm leaning towards the striker in this one. I say Knutsson batters her on the feet. She's much bigger. She's much faster. I think she lands some strikes on the feet. I think she lands a kick. Other than that one high kick knockout, Mann hasn't really been put out with strikes. And Knutsson really, being so decorated, she's not a power puncher. But I just she throws that kick so fast, and I've seen Mann defend the kick. I'm gonna say it happens to get there. I say Knutsson wins by first round TKO with a high kick.
Next up, lightweights take the cage as Alex Reyes brings his remarkable story and tries to write a new chapter to it against Charlie Campbell. Reyes, the 36-year-old Californian, is 13-3 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He got knocked out in his UFC debut by Mike Perry, and that should give you a little clue as to where we're going from here, because that fight was almost exactly 6 years ago. Since then, Reyes has been sidelined by some literally life and limb threatening health issues. He had osteomyelitis, which is a severe bone infection that in a lot of cases requires removal of diseased bone. In his case, it affected his spine, which makes it difficult to operate on and could again have affected his ability to walk, let alone fight. He finally got a clean bill of health last year, was scheduled to make his return to the UFC back in February, I believe. He had to withdraw from that one for medical issues. Whether those were a separate injury in training or something related to his chronic health issues, I'm not exactly sure. But here he finally does make his second appearance in the octagon, finally at his designated weight class, because his fight against Perry was up a weight class on short notice of all things. He had been scheduled to fight Natan Levy. Levy was forced to withdraw, so in comes the debuting Campbell. 28-year-old New York native is 7-2 overall. He fought on the Contender Series just a little over a year ago, getting knocked out in the first round. So he went back to CFFC, picked up a win in June, and gets the call here to replace Levy. Good news for him is he is an overwhelming favorite. Despite being the short notice call-up, despite being the guy who lost on the Contender Series, he is minus 400, Reyes plus 300. Keith, I'm going to flip this one to you first, maybe to remind these people who the heck Alex Reyes is, tell them a little about Charlie Campbell, and man, can you imagine what the line would have been if it had been Levy against Reyes?
Yeah, what was would you say?
Campbell's minus 400.
Yeah, Levy was probably negative 800.
Seriously, I'm on a human level, it would be a cool human interest story, like the end of a Cinderella Man type movie if Reyes comes back and gets a win in the UFC, even if it's on the prelims of an iffy fight night. And
he still has a better chance of Dominic Reyes getting a win. So
Dominic Reyes versus Carlos Ulberg coming soon to a morgue near you.
Dominic might want to call his brother Alex so he can take care of that one. Sit that one out.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a Rudy type story if Reyes were to get a win here. So on some level, I'm rooting for that as a human story, because what happens after that doesn't matter. That's when it cuts to credits. It's not like Rudy went on to play in the NFL or anything. It's not like what's his name from Cinderella Man had a long title reign. It's just, they made it to their one night of glory. Does Reyes get his one night of glory here? What's this fight end up looking like, man?
If he wins, do they carry him off out of the octagon on Dominic's shoulders? And Joe Montana starts bashing him like 20 years later. Side note that Rudy is my dad's favorite movie. Anyways, and of course I got to be the asshole and be like, hey, that Joe Montana says that Rudy wasn't that good of a dude, and the team really didn't like him, and like ruined the movie, and like half the stuff in the movie is made up. That's not how it happened. So this is kind of what happens. So you kind of have to spare some time, and I'm like, oh, let's see. The guy who hasn't fought in 6 years, or Natan Levy, and I'm like, Natan Levy's really good. He's gonna smash him. So I didn't do much tape study, and then all of a sudden Charlie Campbell comes at the last minute, and I'm like, oh shit, and I had to scramble. One thing I didn't address. I apologize for not addressing there. We're taping this a day late. That was again on me. I'm sorry. So basically, anytime we tape late, it's on me. So I just say I apologize for every time we do that. So to get that out of the way. All right.
Yesterday was my birthday. You could have blamed it on me.
Yeah, but it's not true.
Stand-up guy.
It's not true though. Like this guy was willing to big milestone birthday. I'll still do it. Me, I'm like, I'm kind of busy today. If it makes you feel bad, I was on like 3 hours of sleep by last night. I would have been, who knows who I would have been picking. Alex Reyes. I mean, the guy's 36 years old. It's not that he hasn't won in 6 years. He hasn't even fought in 6 years. The card he fought on was Luke Rockhold versus David Branch card. Gilbert Burns was in the opening fight of the card. That's how long ago this was. I know
Mike Perry was still the rising terror of the division.
Yeah, we didn't even know that Mike Perry was black then. Like that's how long ago that was. You know, so. I know he's dealt with tons of injuries, and I was making a joke, and someone were really serious. Like I know he had a spinal injury, and he had E. coli something. I don't even know. I don't know.
Yeah, he had osteomyelitis, that bone infection in his spine. Yeah.
That sounds really, really serious, and I'm making jokes about it.
Every fighter that has a serious condition always says, they told me I'd never walk again, because it makes their story sound cooler when they're coming back to fight. But it's more true in the case of Reyes than in most others.
Yeah, I was just telling you guys the other day about me tearing my bicep. It was funny. The doctor told me I'd never walk again when I tore my bicep, and there I was.
Keith used to walk on his hands everywhere. he's had to walk on his feet ever since,
all right, so I'm judging him off of 6 years ago. He moved well. He's very unorthodox striker. He throws from weird angles. Really wings his punches. He does have some pretty good power. Throws a lot of kicks. He can wrestle, but I mean, it's all come down. All the striking is to get to the ground. He's a very good grappler. He's a good submission threat. He's the grappler in the family, which is funny that Dominic and Alex fight so differently. That's it. I know he runs a business, so I hope the business is doing well. Charlie Campbell, not a guy I'm really excited about coming to the UFC. I mean, he's a minus athlete, very also unorthodox, very herky-jerky, kind of like a Volkan Oezdemir style striker, even moves like him, not the greatest athlete. Tight boxing, good power. I mean, he knocked out his last opponent dead. He didn't have a bad show on the Contender Series because Chris Duncan had a comeback win on him. I mean, he almost starched Chris Duncan about 5 times in that fight. He's got some hard kicks. He throws a lot of kicks. He does throw some kicks, doesn't set him up, so he's open to get countered from that. He also pillars, which I'm not a fan of. He lacks head movement, doesn't really check leg kicks. He doesn't have much of a grind. He can get a takedown here and there. He's okay defensive wrestler. Nothing really stands out to me. His jiu-jitsu is okay. I think Reyes should have a big advantage in the jiu-jitsu. I mean, this is such a tough fight to pick because, I mean, Reyes wasn't the guy that we were super excited about even 6 years ago. So, and Campbell's the same way. So there's two guys I'm not really excited about. And then you add in that we haven't seen this guy in 6 years. I don't think you have some disease to your spine that Ben said the fancy word that I can't say, and get 6 years older and become better. I don't expect that. So, I mean, if he gets the fight to the ground, he should have a big advantage. Campbell hits hard, and last time he faced someone who hits hard was Mike Perry, and Mike Perry starched him. I think it kind of happens the same thing again. I say Campbell catches him early. I say Campbell puts him out. So Campbell by first round knockout.
That's as good a guess as mine. You laid out really well that we're making a pick here in the presence of serious unknowns. The last time I felt this clueless coming into a preview is when I did the Road to UFC ones, where it was a bunch of Asian fighters that all had 5 career fights really short fights against low-level fighters in Asian regional scenes. And I was like, this is my best guess based on what I've seen. That's how I feel here. It's Alex Reyes 6 years later. And as you pointed out, even if he got a complete full bill of health, even if the doctor told him 6 months ago, okay, you are as good as you ever were before you got sick. I mean, 6 years older, but as good as you ever were. It's not like he's been training most of those years. Literally, the whole problem was he was in terrible pain and had trouble moving and was taking a bunch of medications to try to kill this infection. So even more than most fighters between age 30 and age 36, I would be surprised if there weren't some decline in his physical gifts. I'm not super high on Campbell either. When I first kind of started looking at his fights, I saw a guy that had 2 TKOs via leg kicks in his early career, including one in his like both of his appearances in Bellator, one of which I saw at the time because I must have been doing something for the site. And I thought, okay, this must be lightweight Pat Barry just coming out there and sawing people off. But the funny thing is, outside of those 2 fights, he's just sort of a regular leg kicker. Like, he throws enough of them and he throws them pretty hard, but it's just in those 2 fights, he started throwing him. It seemed to be working. The guys didn't adjust, and then he really went to town on them. It didn't, like, it doesn't define who he is as a striker. If he starts kicking it at Reyes' legs, hell, there's every chance it should work. But yeah, he's just kind of a decent regional fighter who's getting a chance here. And I think the main thing it hinges on is kind of what you said. Campbell's aggressive and hits hard and does throw a variety of strikes. That stacked up against all the unknowns about Reyes, and the fact that the one known thing about Reyes is that he got leveled by the last hard-hitting guy he took on. Yeah, that spells probably early knockout for Campbell as well. I'm going to go with Campbell by first-round KO here too, but if I were a betting man, I'd steer way clear of this. We head now to the women's flyweight division for a matchup between Tracy Cortez and Jasmine Jasudavicius. Cortez, the 29-year-old Arizona native, is 10-1 overall. She's on a 10-fight win streak. She got tapped out in her debut. Since then, she has strung together 10 straight wins. Keith will sound off on that in a few minutes here, but officially 10 straight wins, the last 5 of which comprise her appearance on Season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series and her unblemished first 4 fights in the UFC. She fought most recently back in May of last year at UFC 274, taking a unanimous decision over Melissa Gatto. She's been on the shelf ever since, so it's going to be close to a year and a half since her last appearance in the cage. That's been a period of time that, by her own statements, has been full of some personal turmoil and then a few health issues as well, but she's back. She claims to be feeling as good as she ever has in her entire career. That is, of course, what you expect a fighter to say ahead of their comeback fight. But nonetheless, she's carrying all that momentum into the matchup with Jasudavicius. 34-year-old Ontario native is 9-2 overall. She is 3-1 since joining the UFC out of Season 5 of the Contender Series. She's on a 2-fight win streak with unanimous decisions over Gabriela Fernandez and Miranda Maverick. The most recent of those, the Maverick fight, was at UFC 289 back in June. Odds here, Keith, the favorite is -120. The underdog is even money, +100. Who are they?
I'm surprised the line is this close. Cortez is the favorite.
Cortez is the favorite. Tracy Cortez is -120. Jasmine Jasudavicius +100 as your very slight underdog. Keith, you're on record, for any people that have watched our show more than a few times, as believing she should have lost the fight that she won over Erin Blanchfield by split decision back in her last fight at Invicta back in 2019. But nonetheless, you know, you also seem to think Cortez actually is a good and skilled fighter. She just
absolutely
shouldn't have won that night.
Yeah.
I agree on both counts. I didn't remember having an opinion about the Blanchfield fight one way or the other at the time, but I went back and watched it on Fight Pass. I think after the first time you kind of sounded off about it, and I couldn't agree more. I thought Blanchfield pretty clearly won 2 rounds out of the 3. But
should I call it a robbery? Because I've been told that I don't call anything a robbery.
That's
pretty funny. Shout out to the guy who shooted that. That was pretty funny. He's right though. He's absolutely right.
But I'm actually leaning towards Jasudavicius here. We're not talking about a huge upset, and this line might migrate the other way, but in what is going to turn out to be a theme on this card that we come back to over and over again, Jasudavicius is someone that I am realizing that I've underestimated. It's not like I had her entire skill set pegged wrong. She's a wrestler who wants to wrestle, wants to get wins with just kind of takedowns, top control, ground and pound, will take a submission if it presents itself. Just, I underestimated how good she is at it. She's big and strong. I thought she was unathletic, but I think she's a little more athletic than I thought. I think she's a little better striker than I thought. I thought she looked really clumsy and awkward on the feet in CFFC. Certainly in her fight with Elise Reed, which is kind of the first fight of hers I watched. But I think she's improving there. I think she's becoming somebody that uses the reach advantage she has on most of her opponents pretty well, and is all too willing to clinch with shorter fighters that try to get past her reach and use that to get fights to the ground. And I also have a tough time believing that Cortez is getting better. She's at a point in her career where she should be getting better, but she's been a 1 fight a year fighter for the last several years. It says a lot that Cortez and Jasudavicius had the same number of UFC fights, even though Cortez got to the UFC 2 full years earlier. And here, taking well over a year off due to some injuries, and then again, just a bunch of, I guess, issues in her personal life. She may come out laser focused and in the best shape and fighting the best she ever has with all new, wrinkles in her game, but it's hard for me to picture that. And it's hard for me to picture her being able to just either outbox Jasudavicius on the feet for 3 rounds without getting taken down, or threaten Jasudavicius with submissions and, enough to either win rounds that way or make Jasudavicius leery of wrestling with her. So I think Jasmine Jasudavicius wins this just by doing what she does in every fight. Give me Jasmine Jasudavicius to win 2 rounds out of 3, to get takedowns on Cortez, and Cortez maybe stuck trying submissions off her back while Jasudavicius just kind of chips away with ground and pound, slowly advances position. But yeah, give me Jasudavicius to hand Cortez her second official loss on Saturday.
Yeah. The biggest thing I have with this fight, it's a really even fight. You have a star in Cortez who has that Hispanic roots where they're trying to, they're putting on a Hispanic show. She's undefeated. I'm not saying she's going to win the title one day, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for her. She's extremely attractive. She's everything you'd want in a star. Mm-hmm. I know she's kind of killed herself by not fighting a lot, and she's not brash. So that kind of, she's not talking a lot of trash and stuff. So that's kind of not getting her a lot of attention either. But, what she does, she's not the most exciting fighter. She's a very wrestle heavy kind of fighter. So,
she's Paige Van Zandt a couple shades darker.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. She definitely flaunts her body like Paige. Not no one flaunts her body to the extent that Paige does. But yeah. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. She could be. When we say Paige, so before somebody gets at Ben, he's talking about Paige before she got smashed by Rose Namajunas. When there was still that. Yeah. She was at that time. I think Rose was her first loss. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But
no, I think so too. But where Paige was obviously a superstar in the making, but her personality was just kind of genial and polite. Like, certainly she was willing
Yeah.
to leverage her looks, and her actual fights were kind of grindy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that was a really good example. So this fight should be third from the top. Like, no doubt in my mind. I think that why it's under fights like Nelson and people like that just makes no sense to me. And Cortez is on the feet. She's a high output volume striker, moves well, good footwork, works behind a very good jab. She likes to follow it to the pocket where she unloads power shots. Good variety in her striking. She throws a lot of kicks, though she'll often throw a lot of naked leg kicks. She's also very hittable, and that's because she doesn't move her head, and also because she's constantly moving forward. She gets hit a lot. You mentioned Paige Van Zandt battle and clinch. She likes to do the same thing. She likes to close the distance, battle and clinch. She's very physically strong, even though she's not big for the weight class. Like Jasmine, and she's not small, but I mean, like, she's not one of those ones you look at her and you're like, wow, look how big, look at her back muscles, stuff like that. That's not the case with her. So she just understands positioning and everything. Good dirty boxing. She will wrestle like a lot. Nice drop steps. Good at timing her entries. Good at winning scrambles. Strong top control. She is a submission threat. She loves like the head chokes, the guillotines, the barbell chokes. She shows some good submission defense against a good fighter like Melissa Gatto. A good submission artist, Melissa Gatto. But she's not the best defensive wrestler, though. It's technically like second nature to her. It's like she doesn't have she's not a wrestler, but she's someone who wrestles. So that's why she doesn't have the greatest takedown defense. And if she's put on her back, she does struggle to get back up. Now you move over to Jasmine Jasudavicius. She's very big for the weight class. Long and lengthy, very physically strong. She likes to bully her opponent's back, using volume and pressure to get them on their back foot. Long jab. She can stand a little tall, which is an issue. She's been hurt to the body before. When she will clinch, she's so good at pressuring and using her knees, her height to get a good position, and then batter with knees. She will get the fight to the ground with like body lock takedowns, trip takedowns. Just one of these ones like she's not going to blast through you and take you down. She's just going to wear on you and then finally get you down. Very good top control. I mean, go back to like her last fight, Miranda Maverick couldn't get her off of her. Like she had no answer for the takedowns and getting back up. Good ground and pound. We saw like really good ground and pound against Miranda Maverick. But the one big issue is she's going to be such a ground fighter. She doesn't have a submission. I mean, she has a submission. I think she has a submission, but she's not a submission threat. Jasudavicius is a dog. She's very intelligent. She knows what she does well, and she usually puts in a position to win. I thought Cortez was going to be a big favorite. I thought Cortez was going to be like at least a 2-1 favorite based on her undefeated record, which always kind of gets a little bit more pump, the bigger name value, a lot more buzz. So, I don't look at the betting lines. We've talked about this before, so I was kind of hoping she'd be a big dog. I'm sorry, this would be a big favorite. So Jasudavicius should be underdog. Because I'm with you, man. I'm going with the underdog. So this is going to be the Shillan Duffy consensus underdog pick. I think that whoever wins it's going to be a wrestling battle. Whoever is the better wrestler, and I'm not sure who is, but I think Cortez is finally going to face a fighter that she's not going to be stronger than and be able to bully. And I don't think that's the case the other way. So I think Jasudavicius is going to win the grappling battle. I think she's going to wear on top. I think she's going to ground and pound. Give me Jasudavicius by decision.
All right, there you have it. Your first and maybe not your last unanimous Shillan and Duffy upset pick at Noche UFC. Men's flyweights take the cage next as Edgar Chairez and Daniel Da Silva both look for their first octagon win. Chairez, the 27-year-old Mexican, is 10-5 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He made his debut back in July at UFC 290, taking on flyweight super prospect Tatsuro Taira in a planned 130-pound catchweight and coming out on the wrong end of a unanimous decision. He's back in the cage just barely 2 months later, looking to get it back against Da Silva, who is also looking for his first win in the UFC. The difference is he's had 4 tries. He signed with the UFC almost 2 full years ago. Since then, he has lost to Jeff Molina, Francisco Figueiredo, Victor Altamirano, and CJ Vergara, all by stoppage, all within the first 2 rounds. The most recent of those, the Vergara loss, was at UFC on ESPN Vera versus Sandhagen back in March, where he got knocked out late in the second round. I do not know who De Silva has naked pictures of to get his 5th try here. Obviously, the shoot-a-box Diego Lima affiliation goes a certain way towards getting a 2nd and 3rd chances, but again, this is a 5th chance. Needless to say, he is not favored to get it done here. Chairez is minus 225 or so. De Silva plus 180 on the comeback. When you're talking about 2 guys, Keith, that are collectively winless in the octagon, you kind of have to go to the nuances. Well, what else can we take away? And what I can take away is Edgar Chairez may have lost to Tatsuro Taira, but he made him look vulnerable, and he put up a hell of a fight and actually had him in a bunch of trouble late in the fight. And that's against someone in Taira that, again, is as bright a prospect as there is in the lower weight classes in the UFC. Whereas De Silva, he's had 4 chances now against 4 fighters, none of whom are great, and all of whom are, like, none of the guys that have beaten him are ranked or even really in danger of being ranked. And they're all very different types of fighter for the most part, and he's had next to nothing for any of them. I went back and watched all of Daniel De Silva's UFC fights to just kind of, I wanted to take better notes about him and just be able to say, what's gone wrong for this guy in 4 fights? Because in a vacuum, if you just watched him at an open workout, or you saw the little 15-second shadow boxing thing that will play as B-roll while they're talking about him, you think, oh, I mean, this guy looks like a pretty good flyweight. He's young. He's got a very athletic build. He seems fast and fluid. So what the hell goes wrong when they put the pin in the cage door behind him? And the answer is everything. It's
that's good.
It reminds me a little bit of what I was saying about Blood Diamond, both ahead of and coming out of the UFC's Sydney card, where it's hard for me to believe that a team as reputable and as stacked with good fighters as Shoot-a-Box Diego Lima has a 27-year-old decently athletic guy as poorly prepared to defend himself after this many fights as Daniel De Silva.
I wouldn't say decent. I think a very good athlete. That's the crazy thing. He's got a lot of very athletic skills. I think it's in here.
It may be, and you're kind of pulling around to what I was going to mention, because it's not quite like he is porous defensively. Don't get me wrong. He's aggressive to a fault on the feet until somebody hurts him, and then kind of his psyche goes out the window. But to open fights, he tends to be very aggressive. He throws things with power, but he's porous defensively on the feet. Like, poor head movement, doesn't bring his hands back well. It's kind of like what I will always say about Julian Erosa. Okay.
Oh, Julian Erosa got knocked out.
Yeah. It's not like Julian Erosa, where it's just live by the sword, die by the sword. I have all the offensive weapons, but whatever you do offensively, you're going to have a chance for it to work on me. With De Silva, it's worse. Like, all of his opponents have tagged him solidly on the feet, and he doesn't react well to getting hit. It's not a thing like Damon Jackson or Nate Landwehr or Julian Erosa, where if he's not knocked out cold, it just makes him bite down harder and swing harder. De Silva kind of melts. And it's similar when things go to the ground. He is a very good offensive submission grappler, but he's super vulnerable. He comes out on the wrong end of scrambles, or he gets stuck in a position where he's still thinking of scrambling and taking the back or going out the back door, and his opponent's like, oh, there he is, and just starts busting him with hammer fists and punches. He just hasn't put it all together yet. And here, I mean, never say never, but he's presumably fighting for his job. I feel like I've been saying that about all of his fights for a year now. But he's a guy he just barely turned 27. If he gets cut and he sticks it Shoot-a-Box Diego Lima, he could go back to LFA get a bunch of fights on LFA cards in Brazil and be back as more of a complete product. I agree that a lot of what's wrong with him is here between the ears, where he just doesn't react well to adversity. I'm concerned about his cardio. The one time he's been past the midpoint of the second round in the Vergara fight, he was not the fresher man, and flyweight does not tend to be forgiving of people with bad gas tanks. But he's at Shoot a Box Diego Lima. If there's one place where I would send a guy that is athletic and has all the offensive skills, but is a bit of a head case and isn't durable, well, this guy does presumably have to bow to Charles Oliveira every time he walks into that gym. I haven't seen it yet. And again, I'll never say never, given the example of Oliveira. But here, I think Chairez is probably going to knock him out on the feet. I think Chairez's best work is done on the ground. I think he's a surprisingly good offensive wrestler, just for his background and experience. I think he's a good opportunistic grappler who's also good at like securing position and being more of a button down top position grappler. But before any of that happens, I think we're probably going to have a wild slugfest on the feet, and I don't think De Silva gets out of it. Give me Edgar Chairez by first round knockout here.
Yeah. This is an interesting fight. So Daniel started. I mean, that's a guy that I was completely wrong on when he first came in the UFC. I thought it was good. Like I said, he has all those raw tools. He's fast. He's athletic. Like I thought he was going to be really good. It's not the case. I mean, you're right. Why he still has a job, I don't know. I mean, he's exciting. Like, I'll say that. Like his fights, they're not boring. His skill wise, he fights out of both stances. He's got high output, a very slip and rip style. He's got pretty good head movement. He's got good pop. I mean, all of his wins by finish. He loves teep kicks. He loves spinning attacks. He loves spinning wheel kicks. He kept hitting CJ Vergara in a fight that he lost, but he kept hitting him with like spinning wheel kicks. But I don't know, something happens. He got hurt to the body against Victor Almirano. He tries to wrestle, but he's a weak offensive wrestler. He's a weak defensive wrestler. He'll shoot from way too far away without any setups. He's relentless to try to get the fight to the canvas. Even then, he can slam you and lift the hips. And he's aggressive with his ground and pound, and he's got 6 sub wins. We haven't seen it so far in the UFC. We've seen him try to wrestle. He plays a lot of BJJ off his back, though. He was subbed quickly by Francisco Figueiredo. He was ground and pounded by Victor Altamirano. Due to his style, he really gassed out. I mean, he gassed out quick against CJ Vergara, like in the first round, and they got battered because of it. That's probably the biggest issue is his cardio. Like, maybe he can. You know what he should do is leave that team and hook up with. I can't think of his name right now. This is gonna be terrible because he's the best coach in the world. Justin Gaethje's coach there.
Trevor Whitman,
yeah, who just got Gaethje to slow everything down a little bit because. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to bash Shootbox Diego's legal. That's like a top 5 team, top 10 team in the world.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of
Trevor Whitman. Is it even really a team? It feels like it's an invitation only thing where he's got like 4 students.
Yeah, but they're all superstars. Yeah. Yeah. This guy, he's not good. He knocks on the door and Trevor Whitman, new phone, who dis? Chairez, he's a well-rounded fighter. He's, on the feet, he's a pretty good striker, works behind a crisp jab. He throws a lot of kicks. Kicks are a big part of his game, though he'll also throw them naked, which I don't like. He avoids strikes by L-stepping, which is one of the things I do like. He's always kind of changing the angles on his opponent. But he is hittable, and that's because he lacks head movement. If he can add that to it, it'd be much better. But you mentioned he wants to get the fight to the ground. He's a good wrestler. He will wrestle. I won't say he's a good wrestler, but he's relentless. He's definitely a good grappler. I mean, submission threat. You saw how he hung with Tyra, which is extremely impressive. He has 6 submission wins on his record. And then obviously against Tyra, who's a wizard on the ground himself, showed some really good submission defense. I'm not sold on Chairez. I'm not sure if Chairez is, because heading into the Tyra fight, I wasn't that high on him. I wasn't that impressed with him. He just seemed like another guy to me. But you showed a lot against Tyra, but I'd say we've been fooled by that before, where a guy looks really good against someone that's supposed to blow him out, and then they never. It's just like a one-time thing. So I'm kind of worried if that was the case. And like Lacerda has the tools. Like Lacerda could starch him. Like that could happen. We could finally put it together. But until I can see Lacerda like be better on the ground, I'm leaning Chairez. Chairez get the wrestling. And the Lacerda's gas tank really bothers me. I've seen Chairez going hard. You mentioned it, like winning third rounds against Tetsuya Taira. Actually, I shouldn't say I remember. I shouldn't say win the round because I don't remember the round, but like winning portions. Or did he win the round?
He had the mounted guillotine like late in the round. It was almost a 10-8.
Oh yeah, right. You're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay, I just want to make sure I was okay. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. So, like he's getting better as the fight goes along. So, I say Char. I'm gonna say something like that happens again. I say Lacerda gets tired. Chairez locks into submission, and Chairez wins by third round submission when Lacerda's completely gassed.
This is as good a time as any to remind the listeners that Daniel da Silva's nickname, Miojo, is a brand of instant ramen in Brazil. It's basically, Daniel Top Ramen da Silva because, he was so poor. The legend is he showed up in the gym the first day with just a huge backpack full of ramen.
Yeah. Which is not, I did too in college. I loved ramen noodles.
Me too, but like Daniel da Silva, ramen is not durable. By the end of the second round, he's like that last packet of ramen where you open it up and it's just dust.
Yeah, I might disagree on that because I've had like ramen sitting in like a closet for like 6 months and just eat it later and it's still pretty good. So I might have to disagree. I'm sorry that I keep calling him. I know da Silva is his real name, but they call him Lacerda too. So yeah, I think I would know what I was saying.
It's all over the place. The UFC will probably call him Lacerda. We call him da Silva just based on our Brazilian correspondent Christian Stein has interviewed him a bunch of times, just asked him flat out, what do you call yourself? What do you want us to call you? So,
yeah, but you know what? Who matters more? Christian Stein, who's the Brazilian correspondent who can speak Portuguese, actually ask the guy directly what his name is, or what I say? Like, come on.
Well, I mean, between, like, at the bottom is Christian, like, speaking Portuguese and actually knowing the guy, whatever.
Yeah,
and then
whatever.
there's you, and then there's you, you're kind of an authority figure, and then the unpaid UFC intern that like puts the little titles on the screen obviously is like the godlike authority. So, you're
who got him. He's working for the UFC, but he really like he wanted to like intern for college football or something, and he's just like, yeah, we got another da Silva. Oh, his name goes by Lacerda too. Oh, okay, let's give him that because that'll be easy to remember.
We head now to the middleweight division for a matchup between Roman Kopylov and Josh Fremd. Kopylov, the 32-year-old Russian, is 11-2 overall. He's 3-2 since joining the UFC as a former Fight Night's global middleweight champ. He lost his first 2 fights in the UFC. Since then, he's been perfect, racking up 3 straight knockout wins over Alessio Di Chirico, Puna Soriano, and Claudio Ribeiro. The most recent of those, the Ribeiro fight, was at UFC 291 back in July. It was a spectacular head kick in the opening seconds of the second round. Kopylov has all kinds of momentum, and he decided to strike while the iron is hot, stepping in on short notice for Chris Curtis, who had been scheduled to fight Anthony Hernandez. Then Hernandez drops out, and in steps Josh Fremd. So we end up with a matchup made up of 2 guys that were never meant to be on this card in the first place, but nonetheless, we have it. Fremd, 29-year-old Pennsylvanian fighting out of Colorado, is 11-4 overall. He's 2-2 in the UFC, and kind of like Kopylov, he got off to a not great start, dropping his first 2 fights. Since then, he is perfect with a submission win over Cedric Dumas and a unanimous decision win over Jamie Pickett. The most recent of those, the Pickett fight, was in August at UFC on ESPN, Luque versus Dos Anjos. Odds here favor the Russian pretty heavily. He's minus 300, Fremd plus 240. Keith, this is a weird matchup. It's 2 guys fighting on short notice, short turnaround. That really had no reason to. Neither of them had to be on this card, but once Kopylov signed, they were like, well, we need to get him a fight now. We end up with Kopylov versus Fremd, and it's 2 guys that would have been easy to write off a year ago, but all of a sudden are showing signs of life. The question in Fremd's case is whether it's just whether he's gotten better or it's just a case of him finally running into the right level of opposition, because debuting against Anthony Hernandez is a rough look. Tresean Gore is not a finished product by any stretch, but he is a very dangerous fighter. And then Cedricus Dumas and Jamie Pickett are two of the lowest level guys in the division. So it may just be Fremd finally finding his Goldilocks spot where it's not too hot or too cold. Whereas in Kopilov's case, I feel as though he's fighting better. Tell me if you see it differently, and tell me how you see this fight going.
Yeah, I mean, I logged into ESPN today, my ESPN Plus and everything to watch some film and everything, and I get this notification that price was going up by $1. Maybe that's why they're fighting. Like, they need the paycheck. They got the ESPN. You never get that notification of price change, and it goes, "Oh, we're gonna save you $1. We're going down in price."
Yeah, you get that.
Yeah, the UFC pay-per-view is up. This is actually, in my opinion, you got guys on winning streaks and stuff, and if the winner of this one probably fighting a ranked opponent, especially if Kopylov wins. Yeah. This is another fight that's why is this so low on the card? Like, this one should be up way higher. I mean, I know we kind of started to run out of the room when you and I say, like, oh, they should be higher, this needs to be higher, but
is it because they look at Kopylov and they think it's Chase Hooper?
Yeah, the Russian Chase Hooper. No, if it was Chase Hooper, it'd probably be higher on the card.
Yeah.
Kopylov, he's a really big middleweight. He's a good athlete. He's a southpaw, very good distance striker. He's good at. Well, he's an in and out striker. He gets in, gets in his range, pop, gets out. Very good, very sharp, like just a sharp technical striker. Fast hands, great jab. He follows up his jab with like clean punches down the pipe. A lot of variety in his striking game. Good kicking game. Throws a lot of kicks. I love his kicks to the body. I mean, he stopped Puna Soriano, who's a guy that is pretty good middleweight. Stopped him with a body kick. Landed the spectacular high kick in his last fight against Claudio Ribeiro. The only negative really in his strike that I've seen is that he's got clipped a little bit, and in way back when he fought Carl Roberson had a lot of success with the calf kicks, which I haven't seen too much against that since. He can wrestle too. He's got some nice entries, but he isn't a submission threat. And if you try to take him down, he's hard to get down. And when going back to that Carl Roberson, I probably should take it out of my notes now, but like Roberson submitted him, which hasn't aged well. Despite like really looking good, he has slowed down a little bit at times. Like even like he got a win against Alessio Di Chirico and got a late stoppage. He was actually slowing down in that third round, so that's a little concerning. Josh Fremd, he's also a really big, massive middleweight. He's not a great athlete though. He's more of a guy that's just technical and volume. He's a high volume striker, likes to push the pace, force his opponents back, on the back foot. Pretty technical. Works behind a crisp jab, throws straight shots down the pipe. I like his check left hook. He's got more power than I originally credited when he first came to UFC. Defensively, because of his style, he has been cracked a lot. So he has to clean some of that up. He has to get a little more, better defensively sound. He throws some good calf kicks, though he doesn't check leg kicks himself. He likes to close the distance and use his size to grind the clinch. Go back to like the Jamie Pickett fight. He just beat Jamie Pickett up with the clinch, grinded him out for rounds. Underrated wrestler. He has 4 submission wins. He loves that guillotine choke. Fremd is tough, dude. He's a really tough guy. A guy that I thought was a good addition to the UFC, but I think he's been a little bit better than I thought. But that said, I'm all over Kopylov here. I think the betting lines is right on. I'm high on Kopylov. I think he batters Fremd everywhere. I think he lands something big and spectacular. I say he puts him out. Which would be quite a feat and be a really good win. But I think Kopylov does it. Give me Kopylov by second round TKO.
Yeah, I like the breakdown there a lot. Kopylov, it feels like underperformed a bit in his first couple UFC fights. Obviously, the Carl Roberson fight, as you mentioned, has not aged well. Even if Roberson was always a worse striker and a better grappler than his decorated kickboxing background would have led you to expect, that's not aged well. And then from there, Kopylov was gone for almost 2 full years. Since he's been back, he's been better. Go ahead and insert here for the listeners my usual word of caution about athletic fighters coming out of less well-regulated areas. It might have just been a matter of Kopylov kind of getting his chemistry balanced, if you know what I mean. But he's turned into something like I had hoped and expected he would be, certainly over his last 3 fights, the Kiriko, Soriano, and Ribeiro fights. The word you used, I believe, to describe his boxing was crisp. I could not agree more. Someone that he reminds me a bit of, and frankly, I'd love to see him fight, is Michal Oleksiejczuk. I do think he's just going to be too much for Fremd. Even if I've underestimated Fremd, you nailed it. He's very big. Like, Kopylov's a good-sized middleweight. Fremd is a towering middleweight with a big frame. He's a surprisingly good wrestler, and it's not purely tall man wrestling. Like, he will do like an actual shot from the outside and chain takedowns properly. He's someone who clearly wrestled in college, but I think he's going to be a step behind Kopylov on the feet. He's going to be at a speed disadvantage. Kopylov, I think, throws harder, definitely throws cleaner. Fremd's mediocre head movement and tendency to leave his hands down, I think, is going to cost him. You called Kopylov by second round KO. I'm going to say he actually gets it done in the first round, just stings Fremd early, starts rolling downhill on him, and makes a point. But if this goes past the first round, I think that favors Kopylov as well. Don't forget that both these guys are coming in on short turnarounds and short notice, but it's shorter turnaround for Fremd than for Kopylov. Fremd's going to step into the cage 5 weeks after missing weight for his last fight. So even if he makes 185, I don't trust him in the third. I don't trust him in the third round.
Good point.
On August 11th, he weighed in at 189 pounds, and then he beat Jamie Pickett, but the rounds were individually pretty competitive. He had a pretty competitive fight with one of the worst middleweights on the roster after missing weight. I think Kopylov's going to feast on this man, and I agree with you, Keith, that he's probably staring down a top 15 type opponent in his next fight, and I think it'll be well deserved. Next up at Noche UFC, and as the card is currently constituted, the top prelim is a strawweight matchup between Lupi Godinez and Elise Reed. Godinez, the 30-year-old Mexican, is 10-3 overall. She is 5-3 in the UFC. She is 5-2 at strawweight. One of her losses came up a weight class against Luana Carolina when she was trying to set the record for the shortest turnaround between UFC wins. Back in 2021, she fought twice a week apart, won the first one, didn't win the second. So technically 5-2 in her preferred weight class. She's on a 2-fight win streak. Since losing a decision to Angela Hill just a little over a year ago. She has decision wins over Cynthia Calvillo and Emily Ducote. The most recent of those, the Ducote fight, was back in May at UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Hill. Godinez will look to make it 3 in a row, delight the Mexican fans. Oh, wait a minute, this is in Vegas. Anyway, make it 3 in a row and certify herself a rising contender in this division at the expense of Reed. 30-year-old New Jersey native is 7-3 overall. She's an even 3-3 in the UFC and has alternated losses and wins throughout that whole time. She is coming off of a win. She took a unanimous decision over Jin Yu Fry at the UFC on ESPN Cara France versus Albazi card back in June. Prior to that, she got choked out by Loma Lookboonmee. That was back in February. So Reed, again, alternating losses and wins, hopes to break that cycle here and pick up her first back-to-back wins of her UFC tenure. She is not favored to do so, however. Godinez is a whopping minus 450 favorite. Reed plus 325 on the comeback. Keith, I understand why Godinez is a favorite. She's younger. She's more obviously athletic. She's going to have the support of the Mexican fans behind. Never mind. This card's in Vegas. Tell me if that line makes sense to you, if you see any underdog upside and how you actually think this fight goes.
Yeah. Mexican fan in Vegas, just like some guy ordered tequila, like.
Well, you know they're going to be hitting you hard with the Cuervo and Modelo ads.
Oh yeah. What was I thinking? Of course. Yeah, that was pretty dumb with me. Yeah. So this fight, this is. Yeah. Okay. So it really, to me, it comes down to what Godinez decides to do, and I'll get to that in a second. She's a wrestle boxer she uses a lot of pressure. She's got really good output. She does well to cut off the cage and kind of trap her opponent. She works in the pocket, unloads really tight, hard shots. She's got some fast hands. I love her step in right. I mean, she beat up Silvano Gomez Suarez with it. She's got really good power. I mean, look how she's built. Really steps into her shots. She's a good wrestler. Fast entries, very physically strong, gets on the hips and slams. I mean, she threw Jessica Penne around. She threw Suarez around. She threw Loma Labumi around. But most impressive is the girl we always liked is Irene Canalosi. Like she was taking her down, making it look like a takedown. I mean, she had a duck on her in an MMA match, which I love. The problem with her is she's her own worst enemy, because at times she'll just forget how good a wrestler is and not wrestle. I go back to the Angel Hill fight. Angel Hill was a great stylistic matchup for her, and she decided to have a kickboxing match the whole time. Angel Hill is a weak defensive wrestler. She's been a weak defensive wrestler her entire career. The Cynthia Calvillo fight was a close battle because she just didn't go for a takedown and just had a kickboxing match with her. If you try to take her down, she's got good takedown defense. If she's on top, she's got some really strong topside grappler, really good at following the hips and controlling. Showed some slick BJJ with that belly down armbar she had on Suarez. Elise Reed, she's a high volume striker. She uses pressure well. She likes to box, get inside, tight boxing, very, very crisp jab, nice right hand. It's got a little bit of pop in her hands. She has some defense hold. She keeps her chin a little too high, which is surprising for someone who's known for her boxing. The other defense hold I really see is I get it. Like she's open to calf kicks. That happens to a lot of people who's the boxers, the head of their front leg. Go back to the Melissa Martinez kicking out her leg. She can grind a little bit. She can get in the clinch and grind. I started to think she was turning a corner in her grappling. Like she got some trip takedowns on Melissa Martinez in their fight, had some good ground and pound. But then you just keep looking at her other fights. Just a terrible defensive wrestler. I just go back to this. I mean, she almost got subbed by Hilly Rose, who is not a UFC level fighter. I mean, she lost to Luma Lukbumi, which is not a bad loss, but she gets submitted by Luma. That's pretty bad. She's terrible at getting back to her feet. And then even go back to the Sam Hughes fight where she's losing. She showed no urgency to get off the bottom. She's playing jiu-jitsu off her back. So if Godinez decides to wrestle, this is a super easy win for her. This is wicked easy for her. On the feet, it's closer. I still favor her on the feet, and I mean that's why would you say 500 negative 500 favorite, negative 450? Yeah, she should be better than her everywhere. She hits harder, she's faster on the feet, but I expect her to be just see it I could just wrestle it, and why even get punched? So I say she plays it on the feet for a little while. Eventually, she goes for a takedown, takes it down. I say she submits her in the second round. Give me Godinez by second round submission.
Yeah, I frankly don't have much to add to that. The clash of styles, or not clash of styles, the clash of one fighter's strengths with the other one's vulnerabilities is so glaring that this fight really only needs to be as complicated as Godinez wants to make it. Reed is someone that I've actually underestimated over her UFC career. I really underestimated her coming in, partly because of the Hillary Rose fight. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm like, man, if there was ever a win, and I think it was even a title win that tells me you're not ready for the UFC, this was it. But she got signed, and then it's been clear as day. Sijara Eubanks took her down easily and emphatically, and I would say repeatedly, but I think it may only have taken one takedown, because I know she mashed her in the first round. But Hughes grounded her easily, multiple times. Loma Lukbunmi, just just body lock and threw her and took her back and choked her out. I mean, and none of those women are as good a wrestler as Lupita Godinez, not by a long shot. So if Godinez decides to fight to her best advantage and decides to wrestle, the only real suspense will come over whether this is a 30-27, maybe 30-26 washing, or she does get nasty and we get a ground and pound stoppage or a ground and pound aided submission before the final bell. I don't feel minus 450 confident in Godinez just because she sometimes doesn't fight to her best advantage, but I'm definitely confident enough that I'm taking her to win here, because best case scenario for Reed, if Godinez just decides the floor is completely lava and doesn't even try a takedown unless she's behind 2 rounds going into the third, I still think Reed maybe barely beats her. It's just a bad matchup. But yeah, give me Godinez to fight smart, take Reed down early, often, and emphatically. And you picked her to get the stoppage. That would be more than welcome, considering that Godinez has to be creeping up on some records here as she's gone to decision in her first 8 UFC fights, but make it 9 in my book. Godinez wins a one-sided decision, 30-27, again, maybe 30-26. The Noche UFC main card opens up with a featherweight matchup between Fernando Padilla and Kyle Nelson. Padilla, the 26-year-old Mexican, is 15-4 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Fury FC featherweight champ. He debuted back in April at UFC on ESPN Song vs. Simone, where he knocked out Julian Erosa in like 90 seconds. He'll try to keep that momentum going with a win over Nelson. Nelson, 32-year-old from Ontario, Canada, is 14-5-1 overall. He is 2-4-1 in the UFC. It's been a rough run for him since joining the promotion just a little under 5 years ago, but he is coming in off of a win. He fought at UFC 289 back in June, where he took a unanimous decision over Blake Bilder. Odds here, as you might guess, do favor the Mexican. He's minus 250. Nelson is plus 200 on the comeback. Keith, on some level, you are what your record says you are. But having said that, is Kyle Nelson better than his UFC record? Is he better than 2-4-1 in the UFC?
Yeah.
And
yeah, he's pretty good.
Does he get the chance to improve on that here, or do you see actual upside in Padilla?
Does he have a chance? He has a chance. Yeah, does he? Yeah, I mean, I'm not really high on either of these guys. I mean, Kyle Nelson, he's a wrestle boxer. He gets tight inside, nice right hand. When he gets in the pocket, he kind of whips his shots, gets some plus power. I'm not sure if he's a high volume guy. Like, there's times he's like on the gas, pressuring the entire time, and that gives him the best chance of victory. Other times he's kind of gun shy, and trying to conserve his energy. So I'm not really sure. One thing I didn't mention about Stringer, I like that he works the body. That's something I like. He's got some great calf kicks. That's the best part of his game, though. He does often throw him naked, which I'm waiting for him to be countered. He'll close the distance and he'll grind and close quarters. He'll get in chest to chest and just wear on his opponents. He will wrestle. He's got 4 submission wins. Cardio has always been an issue with him because of his, pressure forward and wrestling. But and to his credit, against Blake Bilder, he didn't slow down and he won that fight. So I'm still not like completely convinced to take out question mark on his cardio out of my notes yet. But does this 2 or 3 more times in a row, I probably will. Padilla, he's a high volume striker. He's extremely long and lengthy. Presses action. He's always on the gas. Pretty technically sound. He keeps everything inside with tight boxing. Uses feints well to set up his shots. Just touches until there's an opening. I look that he parries with his lead hand to kind of get himself into range. He's accurate. His left hook is definitely his best blow. He throws a lot of kicks, though he also throws a lot of naked kicks. I like that. I like that he gets to the plum clinch. He's one of those guys. He initiates the plum clinch himself. Got some good dirty boxing. An incredible, before his UFC debut, incredible elbow KO against Cameron Graves. He followed that up by starching Julian Erosa. He's not much of a wrestler, but he does have 8 submission wins. This is a tough one. What did you say the betting lines were?
Padilla's minus 250. Nelson is plus 200.
Yeah, I know. It was, if I'm a better, and I want to throw a bet on an underdog, I don't mind Nelson just because of the wrestling advantage that he could have. I'm still going to go with Padilla. I'm going to go with a up and comer. He's more well rounded. He's definitely the bigger submission threat. He definitely hits harder. I say he gets the best of Nelson on the feet. He stuffs enough takedowns to win a close decision. Give me Padilla by decision.
Yeah, the reason I asked, if you felt Nelson was better than 2-4-1 in the UFC is because I found myself feeling that way. Just he's not great, and he'll probably never be a contender, especially in one of the toughest divisions in the UFC, maybe the toughest division. I mean, hell, he probably got his job saved because his draw in the UFC against Doo Ho Choi, I and most people that I know of scored that one for Choi. One, Choi got kind of an iffy point deduction in the last round off a clash of heads that looked to be pretty much equally both guys' faults. But even so, I thought Choi won all 3 rounds, so I just thought it was a 29-27 fight. But he got a draw there that may have saved his job, and then obviously the win over Builder, cemented. Well, I'm not getting cut now. That's the bad news about the Choi fight. The good news is he really showed off his wrestling there because he took Choi down. He clearly came in with a game plan to take him down because he didn't have to wait to get rung up on the feet and then get desperate and go to his plan B. Plan A was to take Choi down, and he took him down with relative ease in every round, slammed him a couple times, and kind of kept him from doing Doo Ho Choi things. If he embraces that kind of plan here against Padilla, I like his chances as an underdog. I still understand why Padilla is the favorite. He's young. He's a finisher. Obviously, the elbow knockout of Cameron Graves was fantastic, and Cameron Graves is a good fighter. He's someone I've watched since his amateur days here in Texas. He's a guy that I'm mildly surprised had not made it to the UFC or the Contender Series by this point, but just always seems to catch a loss at the wrong times. But like that win definitely counted with me. And then the way he fought Julian Erosa and the way he finished Julian Erosa, that struck me as the kind of fight that if they fight 10 times, they might go 5-5 against each other, and every single time it ends in the first round. Padilla may turn into another Julian Erosa type in the UFC, where his physicality makes him kind of an interesting matchup problem, and he's aggressive but so defensively porous he can never count on him to string wins together. Never makes the rankings, but becomes a reliable bonus machine. But I could see Kyle Nelson not letting this get that exciting. I'm going with the upset here, and I'm going with Nelson by decision. If he knows what's good for him, he's going to try to take Padilla down, because I think from there, Padilla he may have trouble getting up, or he may just spend too much time on his back trying to work from there. But I think he loses rounds that way. Give me Nelson to win 2 rounds out of 3 here, pick up I guess he's a 2-1 underdog, so a pretty substantial upset. But if you're following this at home, remember, it's the unanimous upset picks that you can take to the bank. Just because I said, give me my.
I don't mind that. I don't mind the bet. I don't mind the pick at all. So,
yeah. I see value here because I see a clear path to victory for Nelson.
I do too.
Offensive wrestler, then Padilla is a defensive wrestler. But if Padilla starches him in 90 seconds, wrestling ain't gonna help. So
yeah, we both didn't pick it, so it's not a guaranteed winner. But I give my blessing. To someone following Ben's upset pick. Like, I don't mind it, because I was almost picked it myself. So
next up are the lightweights as Daniel Zellhuber takes on Christos Giagos. Zellhuber, the 24-year-old Mexican, is 13-1 overall. He's 1-1 in the UFC since joining out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He beat Lucas Almeida on the Contender Series, made his delayed debut last September, and picked up his first career loss, a unanimous decision at the hands of Trey Ogden. He came back this April and got back on track with a decision win over Lando Venata, and he will try to put that first career loss further in the rear view against Giagos. 33-year-old Californian is 20-10 overall. He is 20-10 overall, 5-4 in the UFC. He is coming in off of a win as well, knocked out Ricky Glenn in just 90 seconds at the Pavlovich versus Blades Fight Night card back in April. Prior to that, he had back-to-back first-round losses to Thiago Moises and Arman Sarukian. So he'll look to start up a new win streak here. He is not favored to do so. Zellhuber is out there around minus 250. Giagos plus 200 on the comeback. Keith, we just finished talking about a large, long, lanky featherweight. Zellhuber, at least physically, kind of feels like the lightweight version of that to me. Just the young, rangy, Mexican prospect. What kind of upside do you see in him, and do you think he gets past this test in Giagos?
Yeah, I knew Mexico had so many tall people.
Yeah.
But that, Giagos is so this is a tough fight. Like, this is a big step up in competition for Zellhuber. Giagos is a good veteran fighter. I mean, he's an incredible athlete. He fights that way. Yeah, we've talked about this past guy who's an athlete who fights, and compared to a fighter, who happens to be an athlete. Giagos he's the athlete. Like, he's an incredible athlete. He likes to fight at both stances. Very good volume. But he does a lot of the wild, high draining energy moves, strikes. So he tries to take his opponent's head off with a very one single shot every time. He can overthrow his shots. He has a slip and rip guy, so he'll slip and then he'll slip a shot instead of just landing a shot when he's trying to knock you into next week. So he kind of load up on things. He fights at a wild pace. He doesn't know how to pace himself. He will wrestle. He's not a bad wrestler. He's got some mean ground and pound. He's an underrated grappler. He's a BJJ black belt. He's got some good back takes. Though he was subbed by Thiago Moises, but Thiago Moises subs a lot of really good people. But the biggest concern about him is I think he has the physical tools. It's just his mentality. If he can slow things down a little bit, that won't tire out. I think he actually can make a step up and be a better fighter. Now, Zellhuber, he's the raw, God-given tools. I mean, he's a really young fighter, so he can add the technique and everything. But he's long and lengthy. Uses it well. He works well from distance. He doesn't like being pressed onto his back foot. He wants to be the guy keeping his distance, using his feints to draw out attacks. Very crisp jab. He's got some fast hands. He's got some nice pop, and he's not even in this power, stage of his career yet. I love that he works the body. Defensively, he has a very boxing style. He avoids shots with shoulder rolls, which I'm not a fan of, but Sean Strickland would tell me otherwise, and he just won the title. So he can also brawl a little bit, which is fun as a fan, but it's not good if I have a tall, lengthy fighter for the division. I don't want him to get into a brawl, but he'll bite down his mouth sometimes and swing it out. He tends to get hurt in a lot of fights, even fights that he wins because of that reckless style. I like his kicks. Very good kicking game. Great high kick. Nice calf kicks. He loves to throw the question mark kick behind like a strike, which is really fun. Though he will throw a lot of naked leg kicks. He also grinded in the clinch. He uses his size well in there. He had an incredible judo throw in the Contender Series back in the day. Strong ground and pound. He's got 2 submission wins. I don't have a strong read on Zellhuber yet. He's beat some good guys. He lost some bad guys. So if he beats Giagos, I'm going to stop believing him. I mean, Giagos is a tricky guy. Obviously, he's a great athlete. But I'm gonna go with Zellhuber based on, he's younger. He could continue to improve. He's in the right place. I know he's been training with, Extreme Couture, and that team's on a roll. I mean, we talked earlier about, best teams. I mean, is there a better team right now in the world than Extreme Couture? I mean, they seem like to be doing everything right now. So, and I'm sure there's somebody, but you get my point. They're in the club.
They're one of the hottest teams right now for sure.
Yeah. When we're talking about best teams, I mean, someone tells me Extreme Couture is the best team. I'm not arguing. If someone says American Top Team, okay, I'm not arguing. If someone says City Kickbox, I'm arguing. But my point is, like, they're that good. They're definitely the elite teams. So due to his age, due to his chance of improving, due to the raw tools he has, due to his great coaching, I'm going to say Zellhuber. But I'm going to say it's close. I'm going to say Giagos puts him in trouble early. Give me Zellhuber by split decision.
Yeah, I see this as probably a really close fight as well. This is a step up for Zellhuber, as you mentioned. He looked flat out spectacular fighting in Combate and like Hasahi Fight League in Mexico on his way up. Super raw, but as you mentioned, just all the physical tools. He looked good beating Lucas Almeida, who has subsequently joined him in the UFC on the Contender Series. But Giagos is nonetheless a step up, as you mentioned. And I think you also said that if you beat Christos Giagos, you're really good. And that is borne out by the fact that only really good fighters, for the most part, have beaten Giagos. He had a close competitive fight with Drakkar Klose, no pun intended, but the people that have really blown him out, Thiago Moises, Arman Sarukian, Charles Oliveira, there's no
stud. Yeah,
stud. And outside of that, what Giagos does has worked. And you said it all works off of athleticism and aggression. Here, what gives me pause in just going with Zellhuber almost by default is the loss to Trey Ogden. And it's not just that he lost to Ogden, because Ogden is a wily veteran who's already beginning to transition into, his next career as a coach. He seems to be the guy that's picked up most of the shattered pieces of Glory MMA. Like almost everybody who stayed in Kansas City after Glory MMA and Fitness blew up has gone to train with Ogden at Marathon. But it's how Zellhuber fought, because that was one of the most bizarrely passive and agonizingly boring fights. I don't think anybody threw a strike for the first 30 seconds of that fight. I'm not big into MMA video games, but Zellhuber versus Ogden, I mean, for at least the first half of the fight, it's what I imagine it would look like if you set up a mirror match with like two Caitlin Chikagians against each other. Like, for the first little while, nobody threw anything, and then it was both of them like just throwing stuff that came up 2 feet short. Zellhuber should have been able to beat Ogden, and I think he should have been able to beat Ogden definitively. And just he had trouble getting even into second gear. He beat Lando Venata, but I still haven't seen him put together a performance since kind of stepping up to the Contender Series / UFC level, where he's put all of his tools together and into like one complete performance. And there's somebody I said that about on last week's card as well, and I wish I could remember who it was, but I have the same feeling about Zellhuber. Yeah, it may... Yeah, I don't remember exactly who it was, but at any rate, that's where the term too much too soon comes in for me, because Giagos is a flawed fighter, and at age 33, with as much experience at the UFC level as he has, Christos Giagos may just be what he is, but I see this as the kind of fight where Giagos wins the first 2 rounds, either from actually hurting Zellhuber or just from Zellhuber being kind of inert and Giagos winning just by impressing the judges by being the one who's coming forward and throwing more. And then Giagos maybe having to hang on late as Zellhuber is the fresher fighter, but nonetheless does hold on and picks up what I guess is the second 2-1 underdog win I've picked in a row here. But yeah, give me Christos Giagos to win by decision in a fight that Zellhuber and his handlers will probably really, really, really want back after this. Third from the top at Noche UFC is a men's bantamweight matchup between Raul Rosas Jr. and Terrence Mitchell. Rosas, at age 18, I believe still the youngest fighter on UFC roster, is 7-1 overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC out of the 6th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He picked up that first career loss in his most recent appearance. He lost a unanimous decision to Christian Rodriguez at UFC 287 back in April. So he's looking to get back on track, regain that prospect momentum, and continue to work on certifying himself as something other than a future trivia question against Mitchell. 33-year-old Alaskan is 14-3 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He joined back in July, brought a 11-fight win streak, I believe entirely in Alaska, into a matchup with super prospect Cameron Simon. He made it all of about 3 minutes before getting knocked out. So he's looking to get back on track here and certify himself as, if not a contender, at least as something other than a stepping stone for more heralded prospects. He is decidedly not favored to get that done, as Rosas is the biggest favorite on the card, minus 600, Mitchell plus 450. Keith, I'm going to flip this one to you first, but considering that we have a whopping... Actually, you know what? I'll go. My notes are fairly short here, so
Okay.
I've not bought in on Raul Rosas Jr. I don't think he'd even be in the UFC yet if he had his same record and was like 22. I think part of it was the curiosity of getting him on the Contender Series as a 17-year-old.
Absolutely.
And since then, I mean, he took it. His win on the Contender Series is actually, to me, his most impressive win, even though that was the first and only time that he's been to the final bell in a win, because he had to actually fight into a third round against a resisting opponent who isn't UFC material, but is frankly better than any of the people that Rosas fought in UWC. But that was fairly impressive. But then he destroyed Jay Perrin, but Perrin just isn't UFC level. Like, at this point, Rosas he's a very good grappler who is very impressive physically, especially for his age. He is a big bantamweight. I can't imagine he'll still be fighting at 135 pounds when he's 25 years old. But for now, he is a tall bantamweight with muscle on his frame, and at least in the grappling, a very strong grappler. He's not a Damian Maia finesse type grappler. He gets to positions, he elicits submissions with horsepower. Like, just even the way he tapped Jay Perrin, he could have taken another 3 seconds of jockeying and adjusting and gotten a rear naked choke, but he just was like, I'm just going to squeeze this dude's jaw until he taps. And against the Jay Perrins of the world, it was enough. On the feet, he has tools. I mean, he's strong. He has great reach. He hits hard when he hits, but he also has defensive lapses. I don't love his gas tank. The 2 times he's been to the final bell, he's made it, and the wheels haven't completely fallen off the wagon, but I did not think he was the fresher fighter in the second half of the Rodriguez fight. Honestly, what I get from Rosas is a bit of a Paddy Pimblett vibe, where Pimblett's famous out of proportion with his actual achievements and skills. It's for different reasons, obviously. Rosas because he's so young, Pimblett because of the personality and the look. But what Pimblett has, when you boil it down, is he's a very good grappler who is a bit of a liability on the feet and has shown to get tired late in fights. That's what I feel like Rosas is at this point. He will almost certainly be a different fighter 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. I mean, he's just 18 years old, doesn't even turn 19 for a few more weeks. But he's going against someone in Mitchell that is also big and is also a good grappler. Rosas Jr.'s best avenues to victory, the way he's overwhelmed his first 7 opponents up to and including Jay Perrin, may not work on Terrence Mitchell. Mitchell, a tall, big framed guy, not a plus athlete. Cameron Simon beat him by just being much, much faster to the punch. But I don't think Rosas is going to be able to do that. I could see Rosas getting stuck on the feet and resorting to low percentage ways to get the fight to the ground, which I don't think is going to work against Mitchell. I think if he really wants to do work on Mitchell on the ground, he's going to have to take him down for real. I don't think he's going to be able to pull guard, start from the bottom, and get to a position where he can threaten Mitchell seriously. And while neither of these guys is a great striker, and Rosas might hit harder, Mitchell might actually be better defensively on the feet. I've been teetering right on the edge of picking what would be the biggest upset I've picked probably in 2 years. And I'm going to say, screw it, man. Give me Terrence Mitchell to upset the apple cart here, win a decision over Raul Rosas Jr. that leaves the 18-year-old with a ton to take back to the drawing board. He'll be back. The UFC will give him every possible chance, unless they decide he costs too much and they just Sage Northcutt him. But yeah, give me Mitchell to win the decision here.
Yeah, if that happens, he'd probably get. I don't know if they cut him, but they might have to send him down to LFA on one of those developmental contracts.
They'll be calling my boy Mike Jackson and asking if he can make 135.
Yeah, who's a 135 Mike Jackson? It's where we get Rojas versus Perrin too. It's really hard to grasp this kid because he's 18. I seen he lost one fight and everyone's jumping off his bandwagon. I get it, but I want to remind you, he's 18. He's a kid. He's quick on the feet. He's very strong for his age. He's not as strong as Mitchell, and nor should he be. Mitchell's 33. His striking is really bad. He looked bad in the last fight. He's aggressive. He can fight out of both stances, but he's wild. He's a bit of a brawler. He weirdly wasn't throwing enough against Christian Rodriguez on the feet. Didn't want any exchanges there. He throws a lot of kicks. He likes flying attacks like Superman punches and knees. He can wrestle a little, but he struggled to get Christian Rodriguez down, especially in the second and third round. On top, he's got a good top game. He's got a smothering top game. Does advanced position. He's a good grappler. He's got some slick back takes. Busy ground and pound. He is a serious submission. You go back, he almost got a Sula stretch so far in the UFC. He does chase submissions that aren't there, which lose position, which is concerning. But I think that's a little bit of just growing pains. He should be able to control that better as he matures. He's not a good defensive wrestler, and my biggest concern is he gassed out bad against Rodriguez in their fight. Terrence Mitchell, he's a huge fighter for the weight class. He's long and lengthy. He's not very technical. On the feet, he wants to get the pocket and just kind of explode some big shots. He does have power. He looks to wrestle a lot, but I wouldn't say he's a good wrestler. He's definitely more like a grappler. If he gets a takedown, he's pretty good on top. Some good back takes. He is a submission. He's got 8 submissions on his record. But if you put him on the back, he struggles to get there. I'm with you, dude. This line is way off. This should be a pick-up fight. I don't know how you could watch Rojas' last performance and be confident to lay those odds out there and people bet on him. It's got to come down to who's the better offensive wrestler. I don't think it'd be wise for Rojas to strike it out with Mitchell, who he's not a very technically sound striker, but he's not a very technically sound striker, but he's 33, so he's in those power stages. So I don't want to exchange, on the feet with a guy like that. And I'm with you, man. I'm really torn. I was thinking about taking the upset too, and I'm going to go with Rojas. I expect he should get some advances in his last fight. Maybe control his gas take a little bit. He's a guy that he could make improvements in his last fight. I don't think Mitchell makes improvements since his last fight. So I'm taking Rojas. I think he wins a grappling match. I don't expect him to catch a submission, so I say Rojas wins a very, very, very close decision. But I'm with you. On a side note, if I'm gambling and I want an underdog play, I'm with you. Give me Mitchell, especially at those odds, paying out almost 4-1. It might even be 4-1 by the time the fight happens.
No, it's more than 4-1 now.
I thought he was. I'm sorry.
Rosas is minus 600. Mitchell's plus 450.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was for some reason I had 350 in my head.
Yeah.
Wow, it's almost 5-1.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't see who's making the lines what they're seeing, like in Rojas to that. I want him to win. I really do. Like I don't find pleasure, and it seems so many people found so much pleasure in an 18. This is
Northcutt's first loss.
Oh my
people
God!
People are so gleeful.
The nicest guy on planet Earth. He's like the freaking Tim Tebow of MMA, and people wanted to see him lose.
That's the perfect comparison. Yes.
Yeah. Because people, you know what? Side note, this is good. I'm going to preach a little bit. They see in someone like Sage Northcutt this good person quality that they don't have in themselves, so they hate on it. Yeah, that's why people hate on Tim Tebow. Oh, he was a terrible quarterback. Yeah, but he was a good person. He was giving millions of dollars to charity, and you want him to. And the people who like want to see this kid lose because he's 18 and he's done more when he's 18 than people have done when they're 50s. Like, I don't want to see an 18-year-old kid get his ass kicked. I think of Victoria Lee when I think of this kid, and I'm not speculating on what happened with Victoria Lee, so not speculating. Could be completely different than MMA, whatever happened. So I hope there's not too much pressure on this kid. That's all I'll say about that. So I'm going to take Rojas. I'll say he wins by decision.
That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Fight Night 227, a welterweight matchup featuring Kevin Holland and Jack Della Maddalena. Holland, the 30-year-old Texan by way of California, I think it is. It might be the other way around. At any rate, he's 25-9 with one no contest overall. He is 12-6 with one no contest in the UFC. He is 4-1 at welterweight. He fought at middleweight for a while. He fought at middleweight during his surprising rise to prominence during the COVID year of 2020/2021. But once he ran into the Derek Brunsons and Marvin Vittorias of the world, he decided his best future competitively lay at 170 pounds. So he put on the old cowboy hat and took the long ride 15 pounds down the scale. And as I say, since then, he's 4-1. He's on a 2-fight winning streak, those being a third-round knockout of Santiago Ponzinibbio back in April and a first-round submission of Michael Chiesa at UFC 291 in July. He will look to make it 3 in a row and continue to try to certify himself not just a fan favorite and general action fighter, but an actual contender against Della Maddalena. The 27-year-old Australian is 15-2 overall. He is a perfect 5-0 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He is on a 15-fight win streak. He lost his first 2 fights out of the gate way back in early 2016. Since then, he has been perfect. He fought most recently in July at the UFC on ESPN Holm versus Bueno Silva card, where he took a split decision over short notice opponent Basil Hafez that kept his win streak going, but nonetheless showed him to be vulnerable in the eyes of some observers. He will look to put in a performance against Holland that restores the faith, restores some steam to the hype train. Keith, the favorite in this fight is minus 150. The underdog is plus 120.
Wow.
Who are they?
Well, first of all, I had to put my Texas hat on because you mentioned Texas. That's a good one because I was curious. I'm glad you asked me this one. Minus 150. Man, he didn't look good in his last fight, so I could see people jumping off Maddalena and making Holland, but I'm going to say Maddalena is the favorite.
You are correct. Jack Della Maddalena, minus 150. Kevin Holland, plus 120. Having said that, Tell me how you think this fight goes, and did you jump off the Della Maddalena bandwagon to any extent thanks to the Hafez fight?
Oof. I didn't jump off the bandwagon, but like if he stops, he pulls over and take a people can take a piss break. I might jump on a different train, if he stops somewhere, I'm not actively. I was one of the ones on the recap show. Remember, I was giving a little bit of a pass. I mean, it was a different opponent, different. Sometimes when you have this pressure, you're supposed to smoke some guy. You have this where guys are really going all out trying to finish the fight. But this is a step up in competition. I mean, this is not just a step up in competition from Hafez to Kevin Holland, obviously, but just like what he was already facing. Like even go from Randy Brown to Kevin Holland is a pretty big jump in competition. We're going to find out right now. I mean, but I'll say this. Even if he loses to Randy Brown, it doesn't mean that he's not legit. Kevin Holland. Because Kevin Holland beats a lot of really good guys. Kevin Holland looked spectacular in his last fight, but then you also have to ask, like, how good was that win? Because, is Michael Chiesa the same guy? Holland's a long and lengthy middleweight. He's a great athlete, very fast. He's got a good up jab, nice power in his hands, good kicking game, long kicks from distance, loves his high kick, good at following kicks, into the pocket and landing shots. He covers distance super quick due to his length. I've said this before, like one step, he's halfway across the cage. I like that he gets in the clinch and he uses his size in there. He loves to box the airs, which we've talked about hurts really bad. He hits knees in the clinch really well. Underrated offensive wrestler, but a very poor defensive wrestler, and struggles to get back up. I was impressed with, briefly scrambling with Khamzat Chimaev, but his, he's still Grammy rolls and stuff like that. But he showed a much stronger takedown defense against Michael Chiesa, which I like. He is a submission threat, especially like front head attacks. He loves the Darce jokes. He Darce to means. He Darce Michael Chiesa. He was subbed by Chimaev, though. He has a great chin. I mean, he's been blasted by some good strikers, and he keeps going. Not the best IQ. Like he's had times where he's been, stuck on bottom, and he can't find a way to get back up and stuff. Maddalena is a good athlete. He's a great striker. Can fight out of both stances. He moves well, cuts angles offensively super well. He's got some good vision. He's a builder. He tends to get stronger as the fight moves along, especially in his last fight. He's a sharp striker. He's very accurate. Throws good shots down the pipe, short, tight shots. I was sounding a little bit like a broken record because he's kind of in my mind, obviously, from what we saw last weekend. But similar striking style to Sean Strickland. There's not a lot of tells. Everything's short. Rips the body well. Looks for elbows inside. He's got good power. He's got 10 KOs. In the past, he's shown that he's not worried about length. I mean, he went against Randy Brown, got inside, knocked him out. Didn't struggle at all with the length. He is open to leg kicks because he's heavy on his front foot. He has a judo background, so he can do throws. He also can shoot from distance. Pretty good at winning scrambles. Has a very funk style grappling to him. He loves, if you try to take it out, he loves getting up like Granby rolling. Pretty good takedown defense. Pretty good submission defense. This as crazy as it sounds, including the main event, I think I might be most intrigued by this fight. I'm sad we're not getting 5 rounds. I'm sad we're not getting a main event of a fight night by itself, because Maddalena's stock has definitely dropped in a lot of people's eyes. But Holland obviously can talk, and he's been in main events before. I'm really on the fence with this pick. Holland, I always have a hard time picking against Holland because, his length, his power, his speed. He looks brilliant at times. I'm I have a hard time picking against Madalena because I do think he's that guy. You know, I don't think he fell off. I think that was a one-time fight, and he still won. You know, people act like he lost. Maybe it's not that Madalena isn't that good. Maybe Hafez is really good. You know? Man, I feel like I keep flip flopping back and forth because I feel like whatever pick I make, it's going to be a really bad one. You know, I just feel like I'm going to get this fight wrong, and I'm just going to be kicking myself because I you know, earlier the week I was going with Madalena, then I switched to Holland, then I switched back to Madalena, then I switched to Holland, and you know, the length of Holland it was always an issue. The power is always an issue. I keep picturing like something happened, him lock it on a guillotine or something. I'm going to take a decision. I'm going to say Holland wins. I'm going to say Holland wins by split decision.
All right. Keith goes with an upset, you know, after I go with 3 upsets in a row, including just
I can't let you steal all the glory. Jeez.
The suicidally ridiculous, like, plus 450.
No, I think you might hit that one.
Yeah, I like this fight a lot as well. And I look back at the Hafez fight, and there are a couple, you know, obviously, I think that's a card that I previewed alone, and they hadn't even made that matchup yet. So I went into it on the assumption that Della Maddalena wasn't fighting at all. He had been scheduled to fight Sean Brady, which was, I thought, a perfect kind of next step. You know, you go, well, Pete Rodriguez, Ramazan Amaev, Danny Roberts, Randy Brown. It's arguable whether Sean Brady's a step up from Randy Brown, but at least he's comparable on a very different type of test. You know, almost a polar opposite type test. Instead, he gets Basil Hafez, and as you mentioned, if Hafez wins his next 5 fights, all of a sudden, you know, a decision win over him is going to end up looking pretty good for Della Maddalena. Part of the problem is that it's a split decision. I didn't think it should have been. I thought Della Maddalena pretty clearly won the 2nd and 3rd rounds. And if that's on his record as a unanimous decision, and everyone remembers that it was the best fight on that card, and I think they both got performance bonuses for it, all of a sudden it feels like barely a bump in the road on his way to whatever he's headed to be. But when you remember that it was a real competitive fight and it was a split decision, I think that gives it a whole different complexion. I love your breakdown of Holland. Just his body, just his, you know, his actual dimensions, his height, his reach, his athletic gifts, and his approach make it so that he has some weapons and threatens in ways that almost nobody else in the division does. And then the flip side of that is he has some vulnerabilities that, granted, he doesn't always fight to his own best advantage, but even if he did, he'd never be able to completely get rid of those. Takedown defense is going to be a problem for him forever. That's what happens when you're a 6'3", 6'4" welterweight and your pants have like a 50-inch inseam. People can get to your legs and your hips. I liked your observation that whatever pick you make has a good chance of looking really silly, because, yeah, if you picked Holland to win this. If I picked out Della Maddalena to win this, it's not because I think he's 5 times better than Holland, and there's always a possibility that if Holland wins, he's going to do it in some spectacular way. In the same way that I don't ding Della Maddalena too badly for the competitive fight against Hafez, it's hard for me to give Holland too much credit for the win over Michael Chiesa. There was a time when tapping out Michael Chiesa in the first round would have been worth, you know, getting a medal pinned on you. But this was Chiesa that was already in decline, hadn't fought in like a year and a half. Frankly, I kind of wondered if he had transitioned to the desk permanently. Like he did what he was supposed to. I'm going with Della Maddalena here. I think he's smart enough to kick at Holland's legs. I think he's smart enough to go for takedowns, at least enough takedowns to keep Holland thinking about that. If he takes Holland down in the first round, then the next then for the rest of the fight, however long it goes, every time he feints a level change, Holland's hands are going to drop. Holland already has an issue with keeping his hands too low. That just opens up other things for Della Maddalena. So I do think the matchup favors Della Maddalena just winning all 3 rounds in a competitive, really fun fight. But Holland has the power and the opportunistic quick strike submission ability that Della Maddalena could follow the game plan perfectly for 12.5 minutes, and then boom, it's over in 10 seconds. If that happens, hey, I'm happy to be wrong when I learn something, but I'm leaning towards the favorite here. So give me Jack Della Maddalena by decision. With that, we come to the main event of Noche UFC, a women's flyweight title fight between Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko. Grasso, the 30-year-old Mexican, is 16-3 overall. She's 8-3 since joining the UFC out of Invicta. She is 5-0 since moving up to flyweight. She had alternated wins and losses at strawweight, shown herself to be promising, but not quite over the hump. As soon as she moved up to the next weight class, she's been perfect ever since, with wins over Ji-Yeon Kim, Macy Barber, Joanne Wood, Viviane Araujo, and most recently at UFC 285 back in March, Shevchenko. Grasso tapped out arguably the most dominant fighter in the sport with a face crank late in the 4th round, shocking the world. It still might be the upset of the year, despite what we saw in Sydney last weekend. Here, she gets to try and pass the Matt Hughes test. The longtime welterweight great once famously said, of course, that you aren't really a champ until you defend. In order to do so, she'll need to get past Shevchenko. The 35-year-old Kyrgyzstani by way of Peru is 23-4 overall. She is 12-3 in the UFC. She is 9-1 at flyweight. Kind of like Grasso, but approaching from the other direction. Shevchenko was one of the best bantamweights in the UFC, with losses only to Amanda Nunes, the GOAT. As soon as there was a 125-pound division, she went and picked up the belt that had been prepared for her, won her first 9 fights in that division before running into Grasso in March. So Shevchenko will find herself coming out of the blue corner for the first time in a long time, and will try to take back what I'm sure she thinks of as her rightful property. Keith, verify for me, you have not peaked at the odds for this fight. All right.
No.
Okay, rather than call out the line to you,
Okay.
I'll first ask you, who's the favorite? It's not a pick'em. There's definitely a favorite.
Okay. Well, Grasso won the last fight and won by stoppage, but I'm still going to guess Shevchenko's the favorite.
You are correct. Shevchenko is the favorite. What's the line? Shevchenko is minus.
Well, you gave me a little hint that it's not a pick'em, so it can't be more than like negative 160, being that she got stopped last time, and it wasn't like a fluke one-shot thing or high kick. It wasn't the Leon Edwards losing the whole fight thing. I'll go like negative 160 for Shevchenko, plus 140 for Grasso.
You nailed it, sir.
Did I really?
You did.
Nice.
You can get Shevchenko at minus 160. I would say the median is more like minus 170, but there's several reputable American outlets.
What were you going to say the line was? You going to say negative 170?
I was going to say minus 170.
Then I didn't nail it. You gave me some hints and everything, so I didn't.
But it ranges from like minus 160 to minus 200. There are a couple of outlets where
that's too big. That's too big.
And Grasso, yeah, around plus 140. Obviously, I can still remember the night almost exactly 6 months ago when we talked about this fight in the immediate aftermath. We were both buzzing. It was just a hell of a thing. It was one of those moments where you felt you had just finished witnessing something historic. I mean, really, I'm just going to ask you to tell me who you think wins this fight. I'm thinking of an interesting lead-in question, and now I'm like, why am I bothering to do that? This is one of the most anticipated fights of the year. Just tell me who the hell wins this and how they do it.
Yeah, being the whole Mexico thing, trying to get a lot of Mexicans out there in Las Vegas, that I think that definitely helps. Grasso, being that's going to be like a home court type thing. This is a fun fight. It really is. It's one. So many questions are going to be answered. I was going to say specifically about Shevchenko. I think it's going to be answered about both of them. It's going to, if Shevchenko wins, it's okay. Was that a fluke? Actually, maybe it's not true. Maybe it'll actually give us more questions. I don't know. If she loses, is she done? Is her time over? Grasso, if she wins, then wow, she really is the best in the world. And if she loses, was it a Juliana Pena type moment? I'm really intrigued by this. Grasso has looked, obviously looks really good. She's the world champion. What's impressed me is how well-rounded she's become. She's a good kickboxer, nice footwork. I like that her defense is to be away from strikes at all. Like she moves, her footwork is her number one defense. She's a bit of an in and out fighter. It gets inside, high volume. You go back to the Karolina Kowalkiewicz fight, she just smoked her with volume. She's technically sound, fast hands. I was surprised, how much faster she was than like Viviane Araújo. She beat her with speed. She busted Araújo up with a nice crisp jab. She attacks with bursts and combos. Then gets out before this counters. Good kicking game. Especially when she doubles the low, she'll go like high and then go low. Very underrated offensive wrestler. Has greatly improved her takedown defense. I mean, it used to be a weakness of her. I mean, you go back to like the Carlos Esparza fight. She lost because she couldn't stop the takedown, even though she was throwing up some submissions, showing that a sub over Valentina Shevchenko wasn't a fluke. Yeah. So that's one thing that was like always a negative about her, but a couple of fights in a row now, I thought she showed some pretty good takedown defense. Not necessarily against the last fight against Shevchenko, but like Shevchenko is a criminally underrated wrestler. But she's also showed that she has the cardio to go 25 minutes, but she's getting a stoppage in the fourth round. She's getting a stoppage in the championship rounds. Move on to Valentina Shevchenko. Obviously, she's one of the most well-rounded fighters in history. I just talked about her criminally underrated wrestling, but most people would consider her a striker. She's a sharp striker, great variety in her attacks, never really attacking the same way twice. She's good at changing her rhythm. Her volume has decreased. That's bothered me a little bit, but it's still pretty good. Like it's not like she's fighting like Tyron Woodley had to fight in his career or Andre Arlovski. It's not as high of an output, but it's still pretty good. She's explosive. She's good from range. She's so good at getting it out of range flawlessly without getting hit. Some of the best feints in MMA history, where she's setting traps and then exposing later. Great at picking up her opponent's timing, even against Grasso, the fight she lost. Like the second and third round, she was really having her way on the feet. Picking up Grasso's striking. Not so much the first round; she kind of struggled, but then she kind of seemed like she got her timing. She's accurate. Still one of the best jabs in the game. She's good at countering leg kicks. Instead of like checking leg kicks, she comes in and destroys with like power shots, stepping in, trying to time like if you throw a naked leg kick. One big concern I have with her, we go back to like, she showed, she beats Jennifer Maia. She loses like one round. People start like, whoa, wow, that wasn't expected. We expected her to smoke her. Arguably loses Talia Santos and then does lose Alexa Grasso. There's a lot of questions. And I have my own questions, but one thing I am certain, like I don't know if she's declined. One thing I am certain, she can't strike off her back foot like he used to. She used to be the one rare person that you could pressure and it didn't matter. She just like gotta rock back on her back foot and kind of hold her ground and kind of a you did a Lord of the Rings reference recently. I'll do one for you. Like you shall not pass. Like this is as far back as I'm going to go. And you could pressure and she could strike off her back foot. She's a good wrestler, like a very good wrestler. We've seen it fight after fight. She lands clinch takedowns. She can shoot through the hips. Good top control. Let me rephrase that. She's a good offensive wrestler. mean ground and pound, good good submission attack. She's got seven or eight submissions that are on her record. The problem is her struggles on bottom. I mean, Talia Santos had success grappling her. Alexa Grasso had success, grappling her. And even Grasso, to her credit, when Shevchenko put her in some compromised position, at one point she almost had her mounted. Not mounted, in the crucifix. She wasn't able to keep Grasso down. This is a tough fight call. I mean, I don't know how many months ago it was, 6 months ago or something. This was like a no-brainer. That's not the case anymore, which is why I'm so intrigued now. You said you liked having a big favorite at negative 1,000 in squash. No, me, I'm intrigued by this. I want to know who's going to win. If I'm watching college football, I want to see Alabama and Georgia. I don't want to see Georgia versus, Zion Baptist College. I picked Shevchenko as my fantasy pick right after I picked Bo Nickel in the first round. So is Shevchenko declining? Yeah, I think she is declining. She's 34, I think.
35 now.
35, yeah. So she should be declining. And sure. This is a sport. It's like that. It's like NFL running back. And not the NFL running back declined 10 years, even earlier than that. But what I mean is you're the best running back in the league out of the league 2 years later. That happens. Chuck Liddell went from being arguably the best fighter in the world to getting knocked out by everybody 2 years later. Anderson Silva, similar. We've seen it. Could this be happening to Shevchenko? I don't know. Possibly. On the flip side, Grasso looks like she's improving, especially on the ground. So we kind of have that escalator thing where I know they're going to pass each other soon. A year from now, I'm definitely taking Grasso. It's whether I take her now. Even in a fight where Shevchenko got stopped, she had Grasso in some bad position. She was winning heading into the fourth round. I had her up 2 rounds to 1. I gave her the second and third round. She had her, briefly crucified, and it was landed some good ground pound where it looked like, she might even, this is where Shevchenko does her thing and just shows she's so much better than everybody. She was having success, jabbing and slipping back, fading back and then coming back in against Grasso. I think we can see some of that. I can see some push kicks. She got to hold the ground a little bit more. When Grasso slides inside, she's going to have to wrestle. I'm concerned the later the round goes on, especially at Shevchenko's age, but I'm going to say Shevchenko gets the belt back. Give me Shevchenko by decision.
I love the breakdown there. Obviously, when we're having an immediate rematch of a big upset, as the first fight was, the question is always, who has more to take back to the drawing board, and are they things that they could realistically improve on? And was the outcome of the first fight something that the winner could replicate easily in a rematch? Is it my go-to example for this will always be Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey, where in the moment it was shocking. It was the unstoppable woman on whom the UFC at worst was hanging 50% of its future prospects, with the other half being Conor McGregor at the very least. And while Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg are calling her a generational talent, she's getting the break speed off her. And at the end of that shocking night, the whole thing was, well, yeah, it was a shocking outcome, but now that we've seen it, if they fought 10 times, it's going to look like that every time. Holm didn't shock the world. She just taught the world. No, this is what it looks like when you don't have any footwork and you run right at a great striker. It's the opposite, of course, is Sarah versus St. Pierre, where it's like he landed what may literally have been a 1 in a million punch. Here, you pointed out what I was going to go to first. Shevchenko was winning this fight.
Yeah.
And she made a mistake. Grasso capitalized. And once Grasso capitalized, I mean, it couldn't have gone any better. She crashed the pocket, took her back mid-spin, and Grasso gave her zero chance to redeem that mistake. It was a brilliant finishing sequence on the part of Grasso. I mentioned earlier Raul Rosas Jr. getting the face crank submission on Jay Perrin, and I kind of dinged them a little bit for it. And here I'm going to do the exact opposite and praise Grasso for it, because in the case of Rosas, I was like, okay, this is clearly a guy that's just been able to use his physicality to overwhelm people, and he has good technique, but he doesn't always have to rely on it. He's just got the horsepower. In the case of the first Grasso Shevchenko fight, I picture Grasso saying, okay, I've got the best fighter on the planet stuck. I am just going to squeeze as hard as I can and not give her an inch to do any Valentina Shevchenko things. I don't want to even try to readjust, and all of a sudden Shevchenko's spinning into my guard from back control and crap. Hell, maybe she even steals the round back. Like, Grasso was perfect from the second.
Her face was discolored from it.
Yep. But that's the thing. Shevchenko made a mistake, but it's not like Shevchenko was getting tired and Grasso just finally found the perfect moment. It was a mistake. Shevchenko's takeaways, her notes from that fight should be, all right, don't do that particular spinning shit again. Because otherwise, like you mentioned, just about everybody had given Shevchenko the second and third rounds and was probably winning the fourth up until that point. I'm one of the few people that gave Shevchenko the first round. Most people, I think, gave it to Grasso. It was a close round, but Shevchenko was well on her way to just winning a straightforward decision against another deserving challenger, and she made one huge mistake. I agree with you that Shevchenko is in decline. She's meeting the pack in the middle. She is slowing down just a little bit, and there were no Tyler Santos types in this division 6 years ago.
No.
Like, that was the first time, the Santos fight was the first time Shevchenko had taken on someone as big and strong and athletic as she was. So, yeah, the division
in the division.
At 125.
Yeah.
So, sure, Shevchenko is in a gradual decline. The division as a whole is catching up, but that's not why she lost this last fight. She didn't lose because she was old. She lost because she made a mistake. And I'm not willing to bet on Shevchenko making that bad a mistake in back-to-back fights with the stakes being this high. Because the other thing about her is she's so kind of weirdly cold and cybernetic in her approach to fighting. Like, I mean,
I love it.
Even her.
I love it.
No, I'm. It's not a criticism.
No, I know. It wasn't.
It gives her even like a kind of weird, creepy charm. Like her.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
She
Makes
tries
you
to
unique.
be personable at press conferences, and she sounds like Ivan Drago.
Yeah.
Like, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Being stuck in an elevator with her at UFC 262, I think it was. I think it might have been the first time I was ever a little intimidated to be in the same room as a fighter. Mostly like male or female.
And she's like 125 pounds.
Yeah. Well, she was there to corner Antonina, so I think she may have been more like 140.
You watch those. Sorry to interrupt you, but you watch those Avenger movies.
Yeah.
She's that the real life girl. Scarlett Johansson is. Yeah, how she's like supposed to be like a Russian secret agent type. Like that's Valentina Shevchenko.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And she's
not even really sure
nice.
where she's from. Like, we're not even really sure where she's from. Like, like 8 different countries can kind of claim her.
She speaks Russian, but she's from Kyrgyzstan, and she lived in Peru for a while. Like, it sounds like the background
she's training
of a
in
super
Canada.
spy.
Yeah, she's training in Canada this week. Like, what's going on? Yeah.
Yeah, to me, it comes down to either Shevchenko has declined physically in the last 6 months, and Grasso has continued to improve to the point where just Grasso is flat out the better fighter, or I believe that Shevchenko is going to make another mistake of that caliber, and Grasso is going to be able to capitalize on it as perfectly as she did the first time. That's a hard sell for me. So I'm going with Shevchenko to win this one. Give me Shevchenko by decision in a fight that probably looks a bit like the first fight, except for that one little hiccup. That's it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 227, Grasso versus Shevchenko 2, also known as Noche UFC. I've been Ben Duffy. He's been Keith Shillan. If this is your first time listening or watching, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you a mix of actual in-depth analysis along with the occasional humorous or historical aside. Please do like, subscribe, drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on these fights. If you think we're out of our gourds on any of these picks, let us know, or maybe I should say let me know, since I'm the one who made the worst pick. But most importantly, join us for the recap. We will be live on the Sherdog YouTube page about 10 or 15 minutes after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We will talk about all of these fights in reverse order from the main event all the way down to that first prelim. We will talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We'll talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers. And we'll be talking to you, because the live chat on the Sherdog YouTube page is open that whole time. So we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that join us and hang out after the fights, and we would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, disfruta estas peleas.